Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Thought Channel. Tonight's journey takes us back in time for over 3,000 years. Egypt was the beating heart of the ancient world. It built monuments so vast, we still struggle to understand how they were made, and it left behind mysteries we may never solve. This was a place where kings became gods, where entire cities rose and fell with the Nile, and where death itself was engineered to be cheated. Every grain of sand hides a story, some of which we know, but many are still waiting to be discovered. Tonight, we'll step inside that world. From the glitter of a golden burial mask to the shadow of the Sphinx at sunrise, from lost cities beneath the desert to the stars that guided the pharaohs. These are 100 fragments of a civilization that refuses to fade. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind or give you a quiet way to end your day, consider liking and subscribing, or simply share your thoughts in the comments below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. Now let's begin. Mummification could take up to 70 days. Preserving the body for eternity was a complex sacred process that could last as long as 70 days. The first step was to remove internal organs, which were separately preserved while the body cavity was cleaned and packed. The corpse was then dehydrated using a natural salt called natron, which drew out moisture and halted decay. This stage could last 40 days or more. Once dried, the body was anointed with oils wrapped in layers of fine linen and sometimes fitted with protective amulets between the wrappings. Priests recited rituals throughout, calling on gods like Anubis to safeguard the process. The care taken reflected the belief that the body was the home of the soul even in death, and that a properly preserved form was essential for enjoying the pleasures of the afterlife forever. The heart was considered the seat of thought and emotion, in contrast to modern understanding. The Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the center of thought, memory, and feeling. It was seen as the essence of a person holding their character, intentions, and moral worth. In life, the heart connected the physical and spiritual self. In death, it played a crucial role in judgment. During mummification, all internal organs were removed, except the heart, which was left in place or replaced with a sacred amulet. If damaged, to lose one's heart in the afterlife was to lose one's very identity. This belief shaped everything from medicine to religion, making the heart one of the most revered parts of the body. The brain was removed because it was thought useless in the afterlife. Despite their meticulous preservation of the body, ancient embalmers treated the brain as an unimportant organ. They believed it served no role in thought or memory. Those were the heart's domain. During mummification, embalmers removed the brain through the nose, using hooked tools, sometimes liquefying it first. The skull cavity was then rinsed and filled with resin or linen to maintain shape. This practice was so consistent that very few mummies have brains intact. Ironically, by discarding it, the Egyptians unknowingly deprived modern scientists of a potential treasure trove of information. Yet to them, preserving the brain was unnecessary. What mattered was the heart, the body's outward form, and the spiritual protections needed to live forever. The weighing of the heart determined one's fate beyond death. In the Hall of Two Truths, the dead faced the most important trial of their existence, the weighing of the heart. The god Anubis placed the heart on one side of a great scale, balancing it against the feather of Mat-the-Shah, goddess of truth and cosmic order. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul was declared pure and allowed to enter the field of reeds, a paradise of eternal abundance. If it was heavier, weighed down by wrongdoing, the heart was devoured by Amit, a fearsome creature, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus. This annihilation meant the soul would cease to exist entirely. The scene was so central to Egyptian belief that it appears in countless tombs and papyri, a reminder to live in harmony with Ma'art's principles. The god Thoth was said to record the results of the judgment. During the weighing of the heart, the god Thoth, patron of writing and wisdom, stood ready to record the outcome. Depicted as an ibis-headed man or a baboon, Thoth was believed to keep the divine record books, ensuring no injustice could occur in the afterlife. His presence guaranteed fairness, for he was the embodiment of truth and knowledge. If the deceased passed the test, Thoth's written account would secure their place in eternity. If they failed, his record confirmed their fate. To the Egyptians, this act of writing was not just documentation. It was a divine seal, a final and alterable truth inscribed into the fabric of the cosmos. Some tomb paintings depict the deceased playing board games in eternity among the seams. Painted on tomb walls, one recurring image is both surprising and strangely human: the deceased, seated before a game board, often playing against an unseen opponent. The game was usually Senet, a pastime popular in life that doubled as a metaphor for the soul's passage through the afterlife. The bald squares represented stages of the journey, some favorable, others perilous. Winning the game meant safe arrival in paradise. By showing themselves mid-game, the tomb's owner expressed confidence in their skill to navigate eternity, and perhaps also a hope that even in the afterlife, there would be time for leisure and play. The first pyramid was built for a king who was not yet called a pharaoh, long before the word pharaoh became the title of Egypt's rulers. A king named Joseph commissioned something that had never been seen before: a pyramid. Built around 2670 BCE, the step pyramid at Saqqara was designed by his architect Imhotep and marked a turning point in architecture. Until then, kings were buried in flat-roofed structures called mastabas. Imhotep stacked these into a series of terraces, creating a monument that reached for the sky. It wasn't just a tomb. It was a declaration that Egypt's rulers were divine, their power eternal. Though smaller and rougher than the later pyramids at Giza, Djoser's stepped creation still stands today, over 4,500 years later, weathered but unmistakable statement of ambition. It marked the birth of a tradition that would define Egypt's image for millennia. Ancient Egyptian temples were thought to be houses for the gods themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, the temple was not a place for congregations to gather. It was the literal dwelling place of a god. Each temple's innermost chamber, the sanctuary, housed the god statue, treated as if it were alive. Priests tended to it daily, washing it, dressing it in fine linens, and offering food and incense. Ordinary people were not allowed inside these sacred rooms. Their contact with the god came through festivals, when the statue might be carried outside. The temple was designed as a symbolic journey, with each room leading deeper into the divine presence, decorated with scenes of creation and myth. Even the layout mirrored the world. The outer courts represented the human realm, the inner halls, the heavens, and the sanctuary itself, place where the god resided. To the Egyptians, the god truly lived there, and the temple was their eternal home. The pyramids were once covered in shining white stone. The pyramids we see today are weathered, their rough core blocks exposed, but in their prime, they gleamed like jewels in the desert sun. Each was once clad in smooth, polished limestone casing stones that reflected light so intensely they could be seen from miles away. Ancient accounts suggest the Great Pyramid shone like a gem under the midday sun, a dazzling beacon for travelers. Time and earthquakes dislodged many of these casing stones, and later builders reused them for other projects. A few still remain at the base of the Great Pyramid, offering a glimpse of its original perfection. Imagine standing in the Nile Valley 4,000 years ago, watching the sunlight blaze from a geometric mountain of white stone, a sight meant not only to impress the living, but to guide the soul of the king to join the pra-gods in the afterlife. The Sphinx may have been painted in bright, vivid colors. Today, the Great Sphinx of Giza wears the same sandy hue as the plateau around it, but evidence suggests it was once anything but monotone. Traces of red pigment have been found on its face, hinting that the Sphinx may have been painted in vivid colors. A red face, perhaps a blue or yellow headdress, and eyes lined with dark coal-like pigment in the blazing Egyptian sun. This colossal guardian would have been a striking, almost otherworldly figure, half lion, half human, and wholly alive with color. Over millennia, wind and sand stripped away its painted skin, leaving the weathered limestone we know today. Yet imagining it in its original form transforms it from a silent ancient ruin into a vibrant guardian, watching over the pyramids, gazing eternally toward the rising sun. The Great Pyramid's alignment is more precise than many modern structures. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is aligned to true north with an accuracy of less than 1/20th of a degree, achievement that still baffles researchers. This precision was accomplished without modern instruments, relying instead on observations of the stars. One theory is that ancient surveyors tracked the rotation of certain stars across the sky, marking the exact moment they aligned vertically to fix their orientation over the vast base of the pyramid. Even a tiny error could have created a visible skew, yet the builders achieved remarkable perfection. The alignment may have held symbolic meaning too, connecting the pharaoh's eternal resting place to the cosmos. In a sense, the pyramid was not just a tomb, it was a cosmic machine routed to the earth, yet in perfect conversation with the heavens. Ancient Egyptians used a calendar based on the rising of a single star. Egypt's agricultural cycles were governed by the annual flooding of the Nile, and predicting that flood was a matter of survival. The key lay in the star Sirius. Each year, just before dawn in midsummer, Sirius would appear above the eastern horizon for the first time in months. This heliacal rising almost always occurred shortly before the Nile began to swell. The Egyptians built a 365-day calendar around this celestial event, dividing the year into 3 seasons: inundation, growth, and harvest, each with 4 months of 30 days. 5 extra days were added for festivals, thought of as the birthdays of the gods. This Sirius-based calendar was so accurate that it drifted only slowly over centuries, a testament to the Egyptians' skill in blending astronomy with daily life. They invented one of the earliest known writing systems. Hieroglyphic writing emerged in Egypt around 3200 BCE, making it one of the world's earliest scripts. This was not a simple system. It combined symbols for sounds, whole words, and abstract ideas, allowing for extraordinary flexibility. Initially used for monumental inscriptions on temples, tombs, and stelae, hieroglyphs conveyed both practical and spiritual messages. The act of writing itself was considered magical, a way of making words live forever. Scribes trained from youth held a high place in society, for they alone could unlock this sacred skill. Over time, hieroglyphs evolved alongside other scripts, like the cursive hieratic used for everyday writing. But the beauty of the carved signs endured for thousands of years. Each hieroglyph was a picture, but also more than a picture, a vessel for meaning across eternity. Some hieroglyphs represented sounds, others entire ideas. Unlike modern alphabets, Egyptian hieroglyphs were a hybrid system. Some signs represented single consonant sounds like letters, while others stood for combinations of sounds. And still others symbolized entire concepts or objects. A picture of a sundisk might be read as the word Re or a day, depending on context. This allowed for rich layers of meaning. A name could be spelled phonetically, illustrated symbolically, and reinforced with the determinative of final sign, clarifying its category. To read and write hieroglyphs, one had to master hundreds of these symbols, along with the nuances of their combinations. This complexity made literacy rare, reserved for scribes and priests. But it also made Egyptian inscriptions more than mere text. They were art, language, and symbolism all in one. Egyptian priests were also skilled astronomers. In ancient Egypt, religion and astronomy were inseparable. Priests observed the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, not only to keep calendars, but also to determine the timing of rituals. Temple alignments often reflected celestial events, such as solstices or star risings, ensuring that sacred ceremonies happened at precisely the right moment. Certain constellations were associated with gods, and the night sky was imagined as the goddess Nut arching over the earth. Priests' astronomical skills were practical too. They aided navigation on the Nile and helped predict the crucial flood. This knowledge, guarded within temple walls, reinforced the connection between the heavens, the gods, and the pharaohs. Divine order. The ancient Egyptians had a word for eternity, that appeared in tomb texts. The concept of eternity was central to Egyptian thought, and they had more than one word for it. One of the most profound was Jet, referring to an unchanging, timeless state, the kind of eternity the gods inhabited. In tomb inscriptions, Jet often appeared alongside Nai, a word for a cyclical time, like the endless turning of the seasons. Together, they expressed a vision of forever that combined permanence with renewal. A king's tomb, I promise, that he would live for all Jet and all Nehe, meaning both unending and ever-renewing life. To the Egyptians, eternity was not a vague abstraction. It was a destination, a state of being, and a promise written into the very stones of their monuments. Ancient Egyptians brewed beer as a staple of daily life. Beer in ancient Egypt was not a luxury, but a daily necessity. Made from partially baked barley bread, soaked and fermented in water, it was thick, nutritious, and mildly alcoholic. Workers were often paid in bread, and beer making it both currency and sustenance. Even children drank a lighter version, as it was safer than potentially contaminated water. Beer was also a ritual offering to the gods, poured out in temples, or placed in tombs to nourish the dead. Brewing was done in large batches, often overseen by women, and recipes varied from sweet to sour, depending on ingredients and fermentation time. Far from the clear golden drink we think of today, Egyptian beer was cloudy, hearty, and filling, more like a liquid meal. Its role in society was so central that to run out of beer was to invite hardship. Bread was sometimes baked with sand, wearing down people's teeth. Bread was Egypt's staple food, but the grinding process often introduced sand or grit into the flour. Grinders used stone corns, and over time small fragments wore down into the meal. The result was bread that could be harsh on teeth, even for the wealthy. Mummies frequently show severe dental wear, abscesses, and cracked enamel, not from neglect, but from a lifetime of chewing gritty bread. Despite this, bread remained essential, coming in countless shapes and recipes, from simple loaves to honey-sweetened treats. For festivals, it was often baked in communal ovens, filling villages with the smell of warm grain. Bread and beer formed the basic diet of almost every Egyptian, from farmers to pharaohs. And while it sustained life, it also slowly ground down smiles over the decades. The pharaoh was considered both king and god. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was more than a ruler. He was the living embodiment of divine power, seen as the son of the sun god Ra and the earthly manifestation of Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship. The pharaoh's authority was absolute. He was responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept the world in balance. In life, he was the link between the gods and the people. In death, he became fully divine, joining the gods in the afterlife. This dual identity was reinforced through ritual temple inscriptions and monumental architecture. Even the pharaoh's image, carved into stone or cast in gold, was believed to hold spiritual power. To obey the pharaoh was to honor the gods themselves, and his role as both king and deity set Egypt apart from many other ancient civilizations. Some pharaohs wore false beards as a symbol of divinity. One of the most distinctive royal accessories in ancient Egypt was the false beard. Regardless of gender, pharaohs sometimes wore a stylized plaited beard during ceremonies to emphasize their divine status. The beard linked the ruler to Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who was often depicted with a long, narrow chin adornment. These false beards were made of metal, often gold, and tied to the head with straps. Even female rulers like Hatshepsut were shown in statues and reliefs wearing them. It was not a fashion statement, but a sacred emblem, a sign that the wearer was not merely human, but a god king or god queen ruling under divine authority. In portraits and statues, the false beard remains one of the clearest signals of Egypt's unique blend of political and spiritual power. Women could own property and conduct business in ancient Egypt. Unlike in many ancient cultures, Egyptian women enjoyed significant legal rights. They could own and inherit property, engage in contracts, and even initiate divorce. Women could run businesses, manage estates, and appear in court as legal equals to men. Wealthy women sometimes acted as landowners and patrons, funding temple offerings or commissioning art. While political power remained largely in male hands, exceptions existed. Queens and high priestesses wielded real influence. This relative gender equality was rooted in the concept of Ma, which emphasized balance in all things in daily life. This meant that women could participate in the economy and society more freely than in Greece or Rome. Centuries later, these freedoms made Egyptian society remarkably advanced in its approach to women's legal status. The famous Cleopatra was not fully Egyptian by blood. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, is often thought Arthur's quintessentially Egyptian. In truth, she descended from Greek Macedonian rulers who had taken control after Alexander the Great's conquest. The Ptolemaic dynasty maintained Greek language customs and political structures, even as they ruled over an Egyptian population. Cleopatra, however, distinguished herself by embracing Egyptian culture more fully than her predecessors. She was the first of her dynasty to speak the Egyptian language and presented herself as the goddess Isis in religious ceremonies. This blending of Greek heritage with Egyptian tradition made her a unique figure, a bridge between two worlds, and a ruler who understood the symbolic power of claiming Egypt's ancient identity as her own. Some pharaohs married their siblings to preserve royal bloodlines. Royal marriages in ancient Egypt often followed rules unfamiliar to us today. To preserve the purity of the divine bloodline, pharaohs sometimes married their sisters or half-sisters. This practice echoed the mythology of the gods, such as Isis and Osiris, who were both siblings and spouses. While such unions were typically political, ensuring the throne stayed within the immediate family, the pharaoh still maintained other wives and concubines. Not every ruler followed the custom, but when they did, it reinforced the pharaoh's godlike image and kept royal lineage tightly controlled. These marriages were less about romance and more about the unbroken continuity of divine kingship. Cats were revered and associated with the goddess Bastet. In ancient Egypt, cats were far more than pets. They were sacred animals linked to Bastet, the goddess of home fertility and protection. Bastet was often depicted as a lioness or a woman with a cat's head, and her gentle protective nature made her a beloved deity. Cats' ability to control vermin and protect rainstorms added to their importance. Many households kept cats, treating them with affection and reverence. To harm one even accidentally was considered a grave offense. Temples dedicated to Bastet often housed cats, and their likenesses appeared in amulets, statues, and paintings. In life and in symbolism, the cat was a guardian, a bringer of comfort, and a living embodiment of divine grace. Killing a cat was a serious crime in ancient Egypt. The reverence for cats in Egypt extended to strict laws protecting them. Killing a cat, whether intentional or accidental, was considered a crime punishable by death. Ancient historians, including the Adora Siculus, recorded incidents where Egyptians rioted over harm done to a cat even if it occurred unintentionally. This legal protection reflected the belief that cats carried the blessing of Bastet, and harming one was an offense against the goddess herself. Cats were so integral to society that they were often mummified and buried with their owners, ensuring their companionship continued in the afterlife. Sacred ibises were mummified by the thousands. The ibis bird, with its elegant curved beak, was sacred to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. To honor him, Egyptians mummified ibises in vast numbers, placing them in dedicated catacombs. Archaeologists have found millions of these mummified birds, often carefully wrapped and placed in pottery jars. Some were offerings from pilgrims seeking Thoth's favor, while others were part of temple rituals. This mass mummification reflects how deeply animal worship was woven into Egyptian religion, where animals were not merely symbols, but living representatives of the gods they embodied. Many temples were oriented toward the rising sun. Ancient Egyptian temples were not placed at random. Their alignment often followed precise astronomical principles. Many were oriented so that the rising sun at certain times of the year would shine directly into the sanctuary, illuminating the god statue within. The most famous example is Abu Simbel, where twice a year the sunlight travels deep into the temple to light the figures of the gods seated beside Pharaoh Ramesses II. These alignments were acts of devotion and cosmic connection, linking the rhythms of the heavens with the life of a temple. By aligning their sacred spaces with the sun, the Egyptians tied worship to the daily rebirth of light, reinforcing the gods' presence in the natural world and symbolizing the eternal renewal of life. The sun god Ra was said to travel through the underworld at night. In Egyptian belief, the sun was not simply an object in the sky. It was the god Ra himself, sailing his soul about across the heavens. By day at sunset, Ra descended into the underworld, embarking on a perilous journey through 12 regions corresponding to the hours of the night. He faced challenges including the serpentopod's embodiment of chaos, who sought to stop the dawn. Assisted by other gods, Ra overcame these threats and was reborn at sunrise. This nightly voyage mirrored the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that underpinned Egyptian religion. Temples, tombs, and papyri often depicted this journey in vivid detail, showing Ra's boat gliding through star-filled darkness, a reminder that even the greatest of gods had to pass through trials to rise again. Obelisks were believed to channel the sun's power. Obelisks, the tall, tapering stone monuments, often set before temple gates, were more than architectural statements. They represented a petrified ray of the sun, a direct connection to the Soa god Ra. The tips were often sheathed in electron, a gold-silver alloy that blazed in the sunlight. The inscriptions on their sides dedicated them to the gods and celebrated the achievements of the pharaoh who commissioned them. Standing upright and reaching toward the sky, obelisks symbolized stability, divine authority, and the eternal bond between heaven and earth. Their sacred rule was so valued that conquering rulers from the Romans to the French transported them across continents to display in their own cities. Some obelisks still stand after more than 3,000 years. Many of Egypt's ancient obelisks survive today, some in their original locations and others far from home. The oldest date back to the Middle Kingdom, their inscriptions still sharp despite the passage of millennia. The sheer durability of these monoliths comes from their construction. Each was carved from a single piece of granite, usually from Choros at Aswan, and transported hundreds of miles without modern tools. Some weigh more than 300 tons. Their survival is a testament to both the skill of Egyptian stonemasons and the cultural significance of the monuments themselves. Whether casting shadows on temple courtyards or standing in modern capitals like Paris and London, they remain silent witnesses to the power and artistry of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians practiced a form of dentistry. Dental health was a serious challenge in ancient Egypt thanks to a diet filled with gritty bread and fibrous plants. Archaeological evidence shows that some Egyptians attempted dental treatments, including drilling into teeth to relieve abscesses. Writings in medical papyri describe remedies for toothaches, such as rinses made from herbs, honey, and beer. Replacement teeth have been found in mummies, though it's unclear if they were functional or ceremonial. While their understanding of dental science was limited, these early attempts at treatment reveal a willingness to experiment and a recognition of oral health's importance, especially for a society where speaking, eating, and ritual purity all held spiritual power significance. Surgical tools have been found in tombs. Archaeologists have uncovered bronze scalpels, needles, forceps, and even probes among the treasures of Egyptian tombs. These tools suggest that physicians in ancient Egypt were skilled in practical surgery, treating injuries from labor, warfare, and daily life. Ancient medical papyri described procedures like stitching wounds, setting broken bones, and draining abscesses. Surgery was often combined with incantations and offerings to the gods, reflecting the Egyptian belief that physical and spiritual health were intertwined. While not all procedures would have been painless or effective by modern standards, the craftsmanship of the tools themselves finally made and carefully stored shows that surgery was a respected and organized practice. They had remedies for common ailments like toothache and baldness. Egyptian medical papery record hundreds of treatments for ailments, ranging from headaches to hair loss. Remedies blended practical herbal medicine with magical incantations, ensuring both body and spirit were addressed. For toothaches, a paste of crushed herbs and honey might be applied directly to the gums. For baldness, concoctions made from fats of various animals were rubbed into the scalp, accompanied by prayers. Many ingredients like garlic, onion, and fig are still valued today for their medicinal properties. Though some prescriptions seem strange to us, now they reveal a culture deeply invested in healing, one that saw illness not as inevitability, but as a condition that could be treated through both earthly and divine means. Perfumes and oils were a vital part of daily rituals. Scent played a powerful role in Egyptian life. Perfumes and aromatic oils were used for both personal grooming and religious ceremonies, often made from flowers, herbs, and resins, blended into fragrant ointments. The wealthy anointed themselves with scented oils daily, while priests used them to purify statues of the gods. Certain scents like frankincense and myrrh were considered offerings in themselves, burned in temples to please the divine. Perfume making was a skilled craft, and some recipes were closely guarded secrets. In the afterlife, perfumes and oils were placed in tombs to ensure the deceased remained fragrant and pleasing for eternity. Makeup was worn by men and women alike. In ancient Egypt, cosmetics were not purely about beauty, they were a matter of health and protection. Men and women used makeup daily, applying red ochre to lips and cheeks and dark pigments around the eyes. These pigments were believed to ward off evil spirits and protect against the sun's glare. Makeup was so essential that even the poorest Egyptians might have a small pot of kohl. The act of applying it was as much ritual as it was routine, bending aesthetics, practicality, and spiritual protection into a single gesture. Kohl eyeliner served both cosmetic and protective purposes. Kohl, made from ground minerals like galena, was used to create the iconic almond-shaped eye outline seen in Egyptian art. Beyond its striking look, kohl reduced glare from the sun and acted as an insect repellent. Modern studies suggest it also had antibacterial properties, helping to prevent eye infections. The design itself echoed the Eye of Horus, a powerful symbol of protection and healing. Las kohl was not just decoration, it was a protective charm worn on the body, a visible connection between beauty and divine. Safeguarding ancient Egypt had professional mourning women. Funerals in ancient Egypt could be elaborate emotional affairs, and some families hired professional mourners to express grief on their behalf. These women, often highly skilled in ritual lamentation, would wail, tear their hair, and beat their chests, imitating the goddesses. Isis and Nephthys, mourning Osiris. Their performance wasn't just theatrical, it was a sacred duty meant to help guide the soul of the deceased safely to the afterlife. The more prominent the funeral, the more mourners might be present, their cries echoing through the streets and into the tomb. Scenes of these women appear in tomb paintings, frozen mid-gesture, showing that their role was both a public display of loss and a deeply symbolic reenactment of divine mourning. Tomb robbery was punished with death. The riches buried with Egypt's elite were a constant temptation, but robbing a tomb was one of the gravest crimes imaginable. Beyond stealing material wealth, it was believed to endanger the soul of the deceased, disrupting their eternal rest. Legal records from the New Kingdom reveal harsh punishments, beatings, mutilation, and often execution. Even workers who built the tombs were sometimes caught breaking in years later, betraying the trust placed in them. The threat of divine retribution was also ever present. Many believed the gods themselves would curse a tomb robber. Yet despite the dangers, tomb robbery was so persistent that even the Valley of the Kings was stripped of most of its treasures within a few centuries of its use. Some tomb curses threatened to haunt the thief in the afterlife. To protect their resting places, some Egyptians inscribed curses on tomb walls or doorways. These warnings promised misfortune to anyone who dared to disturb the dead, from loss of wealth and health to eternal torment. One Old Kingdom tomb warns, "He who shall enter here without right eye shall seize his neck like a bird. Others threatened divine judgment, ensuring the offender would be denied burial and wander forever. While some scholars think these curses were more symbolic deterrents than actual superstition, their presence shows the importance of safeguarding the eternal peace of the tomb's occupant even in death. The ancient Egyptians took security seriously. Hidden chambers still lie undiscovered beneath the sands. Despite centuries of excavation, Egypt still holds secrets. Modern scanning technology has revealed anomalies in pyramids and tombs that may be undiscovered rooms or passageways. In the Great Pyramid, a mysterious void above the Grand Gallery was detected in 2017, sparking debate about its purpose. Vast stretches of desert conceal entire cities swallowed by time, and beneath the Nile Delta ruins lie buried under silt. Archaeologists suspect that many royal and noble tombs remain hidden, their treasures and histories intact. Each new discovery reshapes our understanding of Egypt and reminds us how much more is still to be found. Some temples contain mysterious depictions of unidentified creatures. Among the carved reliefs and painted walls of Egyptian temples are occasional images that puzzle scholars. Strange animals that resemble no known species or composite creatures not described in surviving card texts. Some may be symbolic, representing qualities or gods, while others might depict animals now extinct or imported from distant lands. In the Temple of Seti, the first at Abydos, unusual hieroglyphic shapes have even been interpreted by Salma's modern objects, though most experts attribute these to overlapping carvings, whether deliberate or accidental. Such images feed speculation and highlight the layers of mystery still embedded in Egypt's monuments. The Rosetta Stone was the key to deciphering hieroglyphs. Discovered in 1799 by French soldiers near the town of Rosetta, this basalt slab carried a decree, written in three scripts: Greek, Demonic, and hieroglyphic. Because scholars could read ancient Greek, the Rosetta Stone provided the breakthrough needed to unlock the meaning of hieroglyphs. After centuries of mystery, Jean-François Champollion work in the 1820 finally cracked the code, revealing the full richness of Egyptian texts and art. Today, the stone is housed in the British Museum, its warm surface still bearing the words that reconnected the modern world with one of the oldest written languages in history. Egyptian boats could be dismantled and carried across land. The Nile was Egypt's primary highway, but sometimes boats needed to travel where water could not take them. To solve this, the Egyptians built vessels that could be taken apart, transported overland, and reassembled. This was especially useful for military campaigns, expeditions to foreign lands, or moving large ships past cataracts in the river. Archaeological finds, including the Khufu ship buried near the Great Pyramid, reveal the skill of Egyptian shipwrights, who crafted planks fitted so precisely they could be disassembled and rejoined without losing quote strength. Such versatility kept Egypt connected far beyond its own borders. Papyrus was one of the world's first writing materials made from the pith of the papyrus plant, which grew abundantly along the Nile. Papyrus sheets revolutionized record keeping in the ancient world. Strips were layered crosswise, pressed, and dried to create a smooth writing surface. Lightweight and portable papyrus replaced heavier clay tablets and allowed for the easy storage of scrolls. Egypt exported papyrus throughout the Mediterranean, making it a cornerstone of ancient trade. Many papyrus documents have survived thousands of years in Egypt's dry climate, preserving literature, legal records, medical texts, and personal letters, a written legacy of a civilization that prized the power dipping of the written word. Ancient Egyptian love poems still survive today. Among the more unexpected treasures from ancient Egypt are love poems written on papyrus or ostrika pottery shards. These verses are intimate, playful, and often surprisingly modern in tone, speaking of longing, beauty, and stolen moments. Some use nature as metaphor, comparing a beloved's eyes to stars, or their lips to sweet wine, likely composed for festivals or private enjoyment. These poems reveal a personal, emotional side to Egyptian life, often overshadowed by monumental stone and divine imagery. They remind us that beneath the grandeur Egyptians loved and desired much as we do today. Music was believed to have magical properties. Music in ancient Egypt was not just entertainment. It was a force with the power to heal, bless, and protect. Harps, flutes, lyres, and percussion instruments accompanied both religious ceremonies and daily life. Certain songs were thought to call down the favor of the gods or soothe restless spirits. Temple musicians held respected positions, and some hymns survive in written form. Music was also a key part of celebrations, from harvest festivals to royal processions, where rhythm and melody merged with ritual to create moments of communal joy. The lotus flower was a symbol of rebirth. In ancient Egypt, the lotus was more than a beautiful bloom. It was a sacred emblem of creation and renewal. The flower's habit of closing at night and reopening with the morning sun mirrored the cycle of death and rebirth, making it a potent religious symbol. In creation myths, the lotus was said to have risen from the primordial waters, its petals opening to reveal the newborn sun god. Artists carved and painted lotus motifs, some temple walls, tombs, and furniture, and it appeared in jewelry as a charm for regeneration and eternal life. Even in funerary offerings, lotus flowers or their images were placed with the deceased, ensuring their own rebirth in the afterlife. Floating on the still waters of temple lakes and the Nile, the lotus was a constant reminder of life's ability to emerge anew from darkness. Some gods were depicted as part animal, part human. Egyptian religion is famous for its gods with animal heads on human bodies, forms that express divine power and qualities. Horus had the head of a falcon, symbolizing kingship and the sky. Anubis with his jackal head embodied protection of the dead. Thoth's ibis head linked him to wisdom and writing. These combinations were not meant to be literal depictions, but symbolic portraits blending human intellect with the strength or sacred traits of the chosen animal. The gods could also appear fully human or fully animal, depending on the story or ritual. This fluidity of form reflected the belief that deities existed beyond human constraints, capable of revealing themselves in whatever shape best expressed their essence and role. The crocodile god Sobek was feared and honored along the Nile. The Nile was home to many crocodiles, powerful and dangerous creatures that inspired both fear and reverence. The god Sobek, depicted with a crocodile's head, embodied the Nile's might, fertility, and unpredictability. He was believed to protect people from the dangers of the river or to unleash them when angered. Temples dedicated to Sobek often kept alive crocodiles pampered as living manifestations of the god, adorned with jewelry and fed lavishly. Upon their death, these crocodiles were mummified and buried with ceremony. Sobek's dual nature, life-giving and deadly, made him a complex deity, one whose favor was essential for safe passage and prosperity along the river. The jackal-headed Anubis guided souls to the afterlife. Anubis, with his sleek black jackal head, was one of Egypt's most recognizable gods and a central figure in funerary rites. He was the protector of graves, the overseer of mummification, and the guide of souls through the underworld. In the famous scene of the weighing of the heart, it is Anubis who adjusts the scales, ensuring justice is done. The jackal form linked him to the animals that prowled graveyards, turning a feared scavenger into a divine guardian. Priests performing embalming rituals often wore jackal masks to embody Anubis's role. For the ancient Egyptians, his presence was both a comfort and a warning, a reminder that the journey to eternity required purity and truth. The sky goddess Nui was believed to swallow the sun each night. In Egyptian cosmology, the sky was not empty space, but the body of the goddess Nui arching over the earth. Each evening, Nui was set to swallow the sun, carrying it through her body during the night. At dawn, she would give birth to it again, renewing the cycle of day and night. She was often depicted as a woman whose body was covered in stars, stretching protectively from horizon to horizon. Nut's rule was not only cosmic, but protective. She shielded the earth from chaos and offered the dare to place among the stars. Her endless embrace of the sun mirrored the eternal rhythms that shaped Egyptian life and belief. The goddess Sekhmet was said to breathe fire, Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and healing, was both a destroyer and a protector. Her fiery breath was said to create the desert's scorching winds, and her wrath could bring plague to Egypt's enemies. In myth, she once nearly destroyed humanity in a bloodthirsty rage, stopped only when, tricked into drinking guide beer, she mistook for blood. Yet Sekhmet was also a goddess of medicine, and her priests were skilled healers. She embodied the dual forces of danger and restoration, a reminder that destruction could pave the way for renewal. Temples to Sekhmet were filled with statues of the goddess, perhaps to channel and contain her immense power. Temples had sacred lakes for ritual purification. Within many temple complexes lay an artificial lake used for purification rituals. Priests bathed in these sacred waters before performing ceremonies, ensuring they were physically and spiritually clean. The lakes also symbolized the primordial waters from which creation emerged, making them powerful spaces for renewal and connection to the divine. In some temples, the lakes played a role in festivals, with sacred boats carrying the statues of gods across their surfaces. The presence of a lake within the temple walls reinforced the idea that every temple was a miniature version of the universe complete, with its own sacred waters of creation. Priests sometimes shaved their entire bodies for purity. Temple priests followed strict cleanliness rituals, one of which was the complete removal of body hair. This practice was not about appearance, but about spiritual purity and hygiene. Priests shaved their heads and bodies regularly, sometimes daily, to ensure they were free from anything considered unclean in the presence of the gods. They bathed multiple times a day, wore clean linen, and avoided certain foods before rituals. These practices were part of a broader belief that serving the gods required a state of absolute physical and spiritual cleanliness, a discipline that reinforced the separation between the sacred and the ordinary. The color blue was associated with creation and protection. Blue held deep symbolic meaning in ancient Egypt. It represented the life-giving waters of the Nile, the sky, and the heavens. As such, it was linked to creation, fertility, and divine protection. Blue pigments, often made from a synthetic material, now called Egyptian blue, were used in art jewelry and amulets. Gods like Amin and Hathor were sometimes depicted with blue skin to show their cosmic nature. Bufiels say beads and tiles decorated temples and tombs, surrounding sacred spaces with the color of life itself. Wearing blue was thought to bring blessings and shield the wearer from harm. Red symbolized both life and destruction. In Egyptian symbolism, red was a color of contrasts. It represented life energy and the desert sun, but also chaos, danger, and destruction associated with the god said. Red could signify both fatality and violence. Artists used red ochre to paint the skin of male figures, symbolizing health and strength. In protective magic, red ink was sometimes used to write the names of dangerous beings, neutralizing their power. This duality made red a potent color in rituals and art, a reminder that the same forces that gave life could also take it away. Scarab beetle amulets were born for protection. The scarab beetle was one of the most powerful symbols in ancient Egypt, tied to rebirth and cosmic order. The beetle's habit of rolling down across the ground was seen as a reflection of the sun god, Ra, pushing the sun across the sky each day. Egyptians wore scarab-shaped amulets as charms for luck, protection, and renewal, often carved from stone feints or precious metals. Some were inscribed with prayers or names to make them personal talismans. Large harp scarabs were placed over the chests of mummies, engraved with spells from the Book of the Dead to protect the soul during judgment. Scarabs were worn in life, buried in death, and even given as diplomatic gifts. Their enduring symbolism meant that to wear a scarab was to carry a piece of the sun's eternal cycle, a divine promise of regeneration and safe passage into the next world. Some amulets were placed in mummies' wrappings for safe passage. In ancient Egypt, the process of wrapping a mummy was a sacred act layered with magical protection between the strips of linen. Priests placed amulets in specific locations to guard the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. These charms came in many forms Ankhs for life, the Eye of Horrors for healing, Scarabs for rebirth, Jed pillars for stability, and tired knots for the protection of the goddess Isis. Many were inscribed with spells to activate their power, some taken directly from the Book of the Dead. The arrangement of amulets followed a ritual order, each addressing a different need: safety, strength, guidance, or divine favor. Together they formed a spiritual armor meant to ensure the soul's safe arrival in paradise. These hidden protections remind us that mummification was not just preservation, but a carefully constructed safeguard for eternity itself. Ancient Egyptian jewelry often held symbolic meanings. Jewelry in ancient Egypt was more than adornment. It was a form of magical and spiritual expression. Every material and color carried significance. Gold symbolized eternity, and the divine turquoise brought joy and fertility, and carnelian conveyed vitality and courage. Designs often depicted sacred symbols: lotus flowers for rebirth, falcons for royal power, cobras for divine protection. Jewelry could be worn by both the elite and common people, though the wealthy used precious metals and rare stones, while others wore pieces of faux or glazed ceramic. In life, jewelry proclaimed identity and status. In death, it was buried with the owner to protect them in the afterlife. The craftsmanship was remarkable, with intricate beadwork, delicate inlays, and balanced symmetry. To the Egyptians, a necklace or ring was not simply decoration. It was a prayer made tangible, carrying the blessings and power of the gods with every gleam. Some statues had eyes inlaid with rock crystal for lifelike gaze. Egyptian sculptors aimed to create statues that were not just representations, but vessels for divine or spiritual presence. One technique to enhance realism was the inlaying of eyes with materials like rock crystal, quartz, and obsidian. The iris and pupil were carved separately, set into a white backing, and polished to catch the light. The result was a gaze so intense it could seem to follow viewers across a room. Such statues were placed in temples, tombs, and shrines, where they acted as a living presence for the god, king, or ancestor they depicted. The realism was more than artistic skill. It was purposeful magic, ensuring the spirit could see and interact with the world. In some cases, the eyes were the most carefully crafted part of the statue, embodying the belief that the gaze itself was a conduit for divine connection and watchful protection. Giant statues were carved from single blocks of stone. Some of Egypt's most iconic monuments, like the colossal statues of Ramesses II, were carved from a single piece of stone, often granite or sandstone, weighing hundreds of tons. These blocks were chord-shaped and then transported over long distances, frequently from US 1, using sledges pulled by teams of workers. Water or oil was poured on sand to reduce friction during transport. Carving from a single block gave these statues immense structural strength, helping them survive thousands of years of weather and earthquakes. Their sheer size was deliberate, designed to project the pharaoh's power and eternal presence. Many were placed at temple entrances, watching over sacred spaces as guardians. Even today, standing before one of these giants fires the same ore, it must have in antiquity, a lasting testament to the skill, labor, and ambition of Egypt's master builders and artisans. The colossi of Memnon were said to sing at dawn. The colossi of Memnon, two enormous seated statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, stand over 60 feet tall on the west bank of the Nile. In antiquity, travelers reported that at dawn one statue would emit a soft musical hum. Greeks and Romans believed this was the mythical hero Memnon greeting his mother, the goddess of the dawn. Modern scholars think the sound came from vibrations caused by the rapid heating of the stone after cool desert nights, possibly due to earthquake damage that created fine cracks. After Roman restorations in the 3rd century CE, the singing stopped. The phenomenon turned the statues into a famous attraction of the ancient world, drawing tourists, poets, and emperors eager to hear the mysterious voice. Even silent, the colossi remain imposing relics of Egypt's grandeur and the fascination it has always held for visitors from far and wide. Ancient Egyptians created the first known peace treaty in 1259 BCE. After Years of war between Egypt and the Hittite Empire. Pharaoh Ramesses II and King Hattusili III signed what is considered the world's first recorded peace treaty, written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform. The agreement promised mutual non-aggression alliance in times of attack and the return of political refugees. Unlike many ancient truces, this one endured for decades, cemented by a royal marriage between Ramesses and the Hittite princess. A copy of the treaty discovered at the Temple of Karnak now hangs in the United Nations headquarters as a symbol of diplomacy's deep roots in human history. The document shows that even in an age defined by conquest, there was recognition of the power and necessity of lasting peace and the wisdom to preserve it through formal written agreement rather than endless conflict. Royal names were enclosed in oval shapes called cartouches. A cartouche was an elongated oval encircling the name of a king or queen with a horizontal line at one end. It symbolized a loop of rope, sieving the royal name in divine protection for eternity. The cartouche first appeared during the 4th dynasty and soon became standard in inscriptions, temple reliefs, and monumental carvings. Its use made it easy to identify royal names in hieroglyphic texts, distinguishing them from all others. Pharaohs also had their names carved in cartunius on jewelry, official seals, and even their burial wrappings. Destroying a cartouche was considered a way to erase a ruler's legacy from history and the afterlife, which is why some monuments show deliberately chiseled-out names. To inscribe a name in a cartouche was to immortalize it, safeguarding the ruler's identity and authority in both the mortal world and the divine realm beyond. The pharaoh's crook and flail symbolized rule and fertility. The crook and flail were two of the most iconic emblems of Egyptian kingship, often depicted crossed over the pharaoh's chest. The crook, shaped like a shepherd's staff, represented the ruler as caretaker and guide of his people, protecting them as a shepherd does his flock. The flail, associated with threshing grain, symbolized fertility, agricultural abundance, and the pharaoh's role in ensuring the land's prosperity. Both symbols had deep connections to the gods, the crook to Osiris as lord of the afterlife, and the flail to the harvest's life, giving power. These emblems appeared in statues, war reliefs, and royal regalia during ceremonies, making them visible affirmations of the ruler's divine right to govern. To the Egyptian mind, they weren't just symbols, they were proof that the pharaoh was the earthly vessel of cosmic order and sustenance. Ancient Egypt had a complex tax system. Egypt's wealth and monumental projects were supported by an intricate tax system managed by scribes and overseers. Taxes were usually paid in kind, grain, livestock, textiles, or labor rather than coins. Farmers owed a portion of their harvest to the state, and officials traveled the Nile to assess fields and collect dues. These resources fed workers on steep projects, maintained temples, and supported the army. Records of tax assessments were meticulously kept on papyrus and ostraca, reflecting the administrative sophistication of the system. Those who failed to meet their obligations risked fines, confiscation, or forced labor. Taxes also extended to goods brought in through trade, ensuring the state profited from Egypt's role as a hub of commerce. This network of collection and record-keeping was one of the pillars of Egypt's stability, funding both its grandeur and its everyday governance. For centuries, workers who built the pyramids were paid in bread and beer. The Great Pyramids were not built by slaves, as once thought, but by skilled laborers organized into rotating crews. These workers were compensated not with coins, but with essential rations, primarily bread and beer. A typical daily allowance might include several loaves and gallons of beer, thick with grain, providing both sustenance and hydration under the desert sun. Payment in food ensured the workforce remained strong and loyal, while also bypassing the need for a formal currency system. Bread and beer were staples of Egyptian life, so wages directly met the workers' needs. Archaeological evidence from workers' villages near Giza reveals bakeries and breweries operating on an industrial scale, churning out thousands of loaves and vats of beer daily. This system not only fed the pyramid builders, but also underscored the central role these humble staples played in sustaining Egypt's most ambitious architectural achievements. Some villages for workers still contain intact homes. Archaeologists have uncovered entire settlements built to house the laborers who worked on royal tombs and monumental projects. One of the best preserved is Deir Medina, home to the artisans who constructed the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The village's stone houses, narrow streets, and community spaces remain remarkably intact, offering a rare glimpse into the daily lives of skilled workers. These homes contained multiple rooms, storage spaces, and even remnants of painted walls. Inscriptions found here reveal details about wages, schedules, and personal relationships. Far from being crude barracks, these villages were vibrant communities, with social structures, religious practices, and a sense of permanence. The preservation of such sites allows historians to understand how Egypt's monumental achievements were supported by organized, well-supplied workforces living in purpose-built settlements near their construction sites. Ancient Egyptian art followed strict rules of proportion. Egyptian artists did not aim for realism in the modern sense. Instead, they followed strict conventions designed to convey order and meaning. Figures were often drawn using a grid system, with each body part assigned a proportional unit. This ensured consistency across centuries and emphasized symbolic clarity over lifelike depiction. Important figures like pharaohs and gods were shown larger than others, regardless of physical reality, reinforcing their status. The rules also dictated perspective heads and legs in profile torsos, facing forward, creating the instantly recognizable Egyptian style. These conventions were deeply tied to religion and cosmic order, reflecting the belief that art was not merely decoration, but a means of preserving truth. By adhering to these fixed rules, Egyptian artists created a timeless visual language that remains one of the most enduring in world history. Faces in art were often shown in profile, while eyes faced forward. One of the most distinctive features of Egyptian art is the composite view of the human face and body. Heads are shown in profile to capture the most recognizable outline, while the eye is depicted frontally, appearing large and almond-shaped. Shoulders also face forward, but legs and feet return to profile. This combination was not an artistic error, but a deliberate choice meant to present the most complete and recognizable form of each body part. The style prioritized clarity and symbolic completeness of a realistic perspective. This approach extended to depictions of animals and gods, ensuring that every element could be read instantly. For the Egyptians, this was a way of preserving the essence of a person or deity, the visual shorthand, but could carry power into the afterlife through the images carved, painted, or inscribed in temples and tombs. Temple reliefs could be painted and repainted over centuries. While we often see ancient Egyptian reliefs in earthstone today, they were originally painted in vivid colors, reds, blues, greens, and golds that made scenes come alive. Over the centuries, these reliefs were sometimes repainted, either to restore fading colors or to update the imagery. A new pharaoh might replace the names or faces of predecessors with his own, reasserting his legacy in sacred spaces. In other cases, religious shifts led to changes in iconography, with certain gods added or removed. Layers of paint discovered through modern analysis reveal this evolving history, showing temples as dynamic living spaces rather than static monuments. The practice of repainting also reflects the Egyptians' desire to keep their sacred art vibrant and relevant, ensuring that the gods and ancestors depicted continued to receive honor through fresh, renewed images. Some ancient Egyptian cities are still buried beneath the Nile Delta. The Nile Delta was once home to thriving cities, ports, and temples, many of which now lie buried under layers of silt and sediment. Over thousands of years, shifts in the river's course and rising water levels submerged these settlements. Archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar and underwater exploration have begun to locate these lost cities, including Heraklion and Canopus, which sank beneath the Mediterranean. Preserved and mud and water artifacts from these sites remain remarkably intact, from statues to everyday tools. Their discovery offers new insights into Egypt's trade networks, religious practices, and connections with the wider ancient world. These hidden cities remind us that much of Egypt's history is still literally beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Flooded temples lie preserved on the Lake Nassa. When the U.S. One High Dam was built in the 1968s, the rising waters of Lake Nassa submerged vast stretches of southern Egypt and northern Sudan, including ancient temples and settlements. Some monuments, like Abu Simbel, were relocated block by block to higher ground, but others were left behind beneath the lakes. Waters like temples, tombs, and artifacts preserved in the silt, protected from moving, but inaccessible to most researchers. These submerged sites remain time capsules of ancient life, their contents potentially as well preserved as those found in the driest desert tombs. Occasionally, droughts or specialized diving expeditions reveal glimpses of what lies below, but much remains hidden. These drowned treasures are a reminder of the sacrifices made in the name of modern progress and the enduring mistress left in Egypt's wake. Some mummies were preserved better than modern corpses. The skill of ancient Egyptian embalmers was so advanced that some mummies have survived in remarkable condition for over 3,000 years. Skin, hair, and even tattoos remain visible, offering researchers unprecedented insight into the lives of the deceased. Modern forensic studies show that the combination of careful organ removal, drying with natron, and treatment with resins created an environment hostile to decay. In some cases, the preservation is so perfect that facial expressions and injuries are still discernible. This level of preservation was not only a practical achievement, but also a spiritual one, ensuring that the body remained a viable vessel for the soul in the afterlife. The fact that some ancient mummies are better preserved than bodies embalmed with modern techniques speaks to the sophistication and precision of Egyptian funerary science. Ancient embalming recipes included exotic resins. Egyptian embalmers used a variety of materials to preserve the body, many sourced from distant lands. Resins from conifer trees, bitumen from the Dead Sea, myrrh from Punt, and cedar oil from Lebanon were among the most valued ingredients. These substances were prized not only for their preservative properties, but also for their fragrance, which masked the odor of decay and carried religious significance. The procurement of such materials reveals a vast trade network stretching far beyond Egypt's borders. Chemical analyses of mummy wrappings have confirmed these exotic origins, showing that embalming was both a spiritual ritual and an international enterprise. The use of rare imports in mummification reflects the importance placed on the eternal preservation of the body, no matter the cost or distance. Canopic jars held the organs of the dead for the afterlife. During mummification, 4 key organs, the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, were removed, treated, and placed in canopic jars. Each jar was protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus, depicted on the lids as human, jackal, baboon, and falcon heads. These guardians ensured the organ's safety in the afterlife, where they were believed to be needed again. The heart was usually left in place or replaced with an amulet, while the brain was discarded. Canopic jars were made from materials ranging from limestone to alabaster, often beautifully carved and inscribed with protective spells. Placed alongside the mummy in the tomb, they were an integral part of the journey to eternity, embodying the Egyptian belief that the physical body, complete and protected, was essential for everlasting life. Some pharaohs built hidden tombs to foil grave robbers. Tomb robbery was a constant threat in ancient Egypt, so some pharaohs devised elaborate ways to conceal their burial places. Hidden entrances, false corridors, and misleading inscriptions were used to confuse would-be thieves. In some cases, the tomb location itself was kept secret, built in remote valleys, far from the bustle of temple complexes. The Valley of the Kings became a favored site, partly because its steep cliffs and winding paths offered natural protection. Some tombs were started and then abandoned if secrecy was compromised. Despite these efforts, few royal tombs escaped looting entirely. drive to hide a pharaoh's resting place reveals both the immense value of the treasures buried within and the deep fear that violating a tomb could endanger the soul in the afterlife, a risk no ruler could afford to take. The Valley of the Kings contains more than 60 tombs carved into the cliffs west of Luxor. The Valley of the Kings served as the royal burial ground for nearly 5 centuries. During the New Kingdom, over 60 tombs have been discovered, ranging from simple pits to vast decorated corridors leading deep into the rock. The tombs were designed to protect the mummified pharaohs and their treasures while symbolically guiding them through the underworld. Walls are covered in scenes from sacred texts like the Book of the Dead, showing God's protective spells and the pharaoh's journey toward eternal life. Many tombs are linked to famous rulers, Ramesses II Seti I and Tutankhamun. And while most were robbed in antiquity, the artwork and architecture remain some of the most impressive in Egypt. The valley continues to yield new discoveries, reminding us that even after centuries of exploration, Egypt's secrets are far from exhausted. Tutankhamun's tomb contained over 5,000 objects. When Howard Carter uncovered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he found a treasure hoard unlike anything seen before. Over 5,000 objects filled the chambers. Golden shrines, chariots, clothing, weapons, jewelry, statues, and everyday items meant to serve the young king in the afterlife. Many were crafted with astonishing detail, combining gold inlays of precious stones and intricate carvings. The sheer variety reflected the Egyptian belief that the afterlife was a continuation of earthly life, requiring both luxury and practicality. Even mundane items like jars of honey and linen garments were included. Because Tutankhamun's tomb was small for a pharaoh, it was packed tightly, creating the sense of stepping into a royal storeroom frozen in time. This unprecedented find gave the modern world its most complete glimpse into the burial traditions of Egypt's rulers. Burial mask is made of solid gold. Tutankhamun's burial mask is one of the most iconic artifacts in the world, a masterwork of ancient craftsmanship. Made of more than 20 pounds of solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli quartz and colored glass, the mask portrays the young king's serene, idealized face. It was designed not only to honor his image, but also to serve as a magical safeguard for his journey through the afterlife. The mask's inscriptions include protective spells from the Book of the Dead, ensuring the king's safety and eternal life. Its construction reveals the sophistication of Egyptian goldsmiths, who could shape and join precious metals with flawless precision. When Carter first lifted it from the mummy, he was seeing a piece of art that had not been touched for more than 3,000 years, a direct, glittering connection between our world and ancient Egypt's vision of Korea immortality. The curse of Tutankhamun may be more myth than fact. After the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, rumors spread that those who entered were struck by a deadly curse. The sudden death of Lord Carnarvon, who financed the excavation, fueled the legend. Newspapers eagerly reported any illness or misfortune among the excavation team, suggesting supernatural revenge for disturbing the king's rest. In reality, most people present at the opening lived long, healthy lives, including Howard Carter himself. Modern scholars believe the curse was a mix of coincidence, media sensationalism, and perhaps exposure to harmful bacteria or mold within the sealed tomb. The myth persists because it taps into the timeless fascination with ancient Egypt's mysteries and the idea that some secrets are meant to remain untouched. Ancient Egyptians practiced animal mummification on a massive scale. Animal mummification was a widespread practice in ancient Egypt, serving both religious and symbolic purposes. Cats, ibises, crocodiles, bulls, and countless other species were embalmed as offerings to the gods they represented. Some were beloved pets buried with their owners, while others were ritually bred and sacrificed to temples. Mummified animals were sold to pilgrims who presented them to temples as acts of devotion. The process mirrored human mummification, involving drying, wrapping, and placement in decorated coffins or jars. Animal necropolises have been found containing thousands, even millions of such mummies, revealing the enormous scale of this practice. Millions of mummified animals have been discovered. Excavations across Egypt have revealed vast burial grounds containing millions of mummified animals. At Saqqara catacombs hold countless ibises, falcons, and dogs, carefully wrapped and placed in jars or wooden boxes. Some were prepared with great care, using fine linen and resins, while others appear hastily made likely for mass offerings. This industry of animal mummification suggests a large-scale, religious economy with breeders, embalmers, and temple attendants all involved. These finds not only highlight the depth of animal worship in Egyptian religion, but also provide clues about ancient animal husbandry and trade. Networks used to supply the demand for sacred creatures. Sacred balls were buried in huge stone sarcophagi. The Apis bull was considered a living manifestation of the god Tar, and later linked to Osiris, chosen for specific markings. Each sacred bull lived a pampered life in Memphis before receiving an elaborate burial at Saqqara's Serapeum. Massive granite sarcophagi, some weighing over 70 tons, were built to house their mummified remains. These tombs were part of a vast underground complex reflecting the high status of the Apis bull in Egyptian religion. The burials were attended by priests and accompanied by offerings underscoring the belief that these animals were not merely symbols but divine beings worthy of royal treatment. Ancient Egypt once ruled territories far beyond the Nile. At its height, Egypt extended well beyond the Tarpland. Pharaohs of the New Kingdom controlled territories in modern-day Sudan, Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. These conquests brought valuable resources: gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon, and tribute from vassal states. Egypt maintained its influence through garrisons, fortresses, and alliances cemented by diplomatic marriages. This expansion not only enriched Egypt, but also spread its art, architecture, and religious ideas across the Near East. Foreign gods, goods, and styles flowed back into Egypt, creating a dynamic cultural exchange that reshaped the kingdom's own traditions. The empire stretched into modern-day Sudan and the Levant. Egypt's southern reach extended deep into Nubia, where it established fortresses and temples along the Nile. This region was vital for its rich gold mines and strategic control of trade routes. To the northeast, Egypt's influence reached into the Levant, dominating key cities and ports along the Mediterranean coast. These territories were not simply conquered, but integrated into Egypt's economic and political sphere. Artifacts from these regions show a blending of Egyptian and local styles, illustrating how far Egyptian culture spread and how it absorbed foreign influences. In return, this imperial reach helped secure Egypt's prosperity for centuries. Trade routes brought lapis lazuli from thousands of miles away. Lapis lazuli, with its deep blue color flecked with gold, was among the most prized stones in ancient Egypt. It was not found locally. Instead, it came from distant mines in what is now Afghanistan, over 2,000 miles away. This meant it traveled along the vast trade network through Mesopotamia and the Levant before reaching Egypt. The stone was carved into amulets, inlaid into jewelry, and crushed into powder for cosmetics and painting. Its color symbolized the heavens and divine protection, making it a favorite for sacred objects and royal adornments. The presence of lapis lazuli in tombs, including that of Tutankhamun, reveals both Egypt's far-reaching connections and the immense value placed on materials imbued with symbolic power. Its journey from distant mountains to the banks of the Nile speaks to the interconnectedness of the ancient world long before modern trade. Incense was imported from the land of Punt. Incense played a vital role in Egyptian religion, burned in temples to please the gods and purify sacred spaces. The most treasured resins, frankincense and myrrh, came from a mysterious region known as Punt, located somewhere along the Red Sea or Horn of Africa. Punt was famed for its aromatic trees, gold, ivory, and exotic animals. Egyptian expeditions to Punt are depicted on temple wars, most famously at Hatshepsut's temple at Dar el-Bahri, where reliefs show ships laden with goods and even transplanted incense trees. These fragrant imports were so valued that they were considered offerings worthy of the gods themselves. The connection to Punt was more than trade. It was a symbolic link to a land of abundance and divine favor. The scent of its incense filled Egypt's temples, carrying prayers upward like smoke into the realm of the gods. Punt's exact location remains a mystery. Despite detailed ancient records, the precise location of Punt has never been confirmed. Egyptian texts describe it as a land rich in incense, gold, ebony, and exotic animals reached by sailing the Red Sea. Most scholars place it in the Horn of Africa, likely in modern-day Eritrea, Somalia, or eastern Sudan. But others suggest it could have been further south, or even across the Arabian Peninsula. Reliefs from Hatshepsut's reign depict its people houses on stilts and lush landscapes, yet no definitive archaeological site has been found. Punt occupied a neo-mythic place in the Egyptian imagination, celebrated as a source of divine goods and blessings. The fact that its location remains unknown mountain, enduring mystery to Egypt's history, reminding us how much of the ancient world is still beyond our reach, despite centuries of study and exploration. Ancient Egyptian ships ventured deep into the Red Sea to reach distant lands like Punt. Egyptians built sturdy seagoing vessels, capable of navigating the Red Sea's challenging waters. These ships were often constructed from cedar, imported from Lebanon, lashed together with rope rather than nails. Reliefs show large crews rowing alongside square sails with cargo holds packed with goods. Expeditions required careful planning, as they could last months and depended on seasonal winds. Harbors like Mercer Galacis on the Red Sea coast have yielded remains of ship timbers, ropes, and cargo boxes, offering rare physical evidence of Egypt's maritime reach. These voyages brought back incense, exotic animals, gold, and other treasures, strengthening Egypt's economy and prestige. They also demonstrate the Egyptians' advanced shipbuilding skills and willingness to venture far beyond the safety of the Nile to expand their influence across seas. War chariots changed the nature of Egyptian warfare. Introduced to Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, likely by the Hyksos, the horse-drawn chariot revolutionized Egyptian military strategy. Light, fast, and highly maneuverable chariots allowed archers to fire from a moving platform, increasing both range and speed and battle. By the New Kingdom, chariots had become symbols of royal power, used not only in warfare, but also in ceremonial processions. Pharaohs like Ramesses II are depicted leading chariot charges, bow drawn, trampling enemies beneath their wheels. Chariots required skilled teams, a driver and an archer, and were expensive to maintain, making them elite units within the army. Their arrival marked Egypt's shift toward more mobile, aggressive tactics, allowing it to project power farther and more effectively. Some pharaohs were skilled military commanders. While many pharaohs relied on generals to lead their armies, others took personal command in the field. Thutmose III, often called Egypt's Napoleon, led campaigns into the Levant and Nubia, expanding Egypt's empire to its greatest extent. Ramesses II famously fought at the Battle of Kadesh, personally directing chariot charges. Despite the chaos, such leadership was more than military. It reinforced the pharaoh's divine role as protector of Egypt, a warrior appointed by the gods. Victories were recorded on temple walls, blending history with propaganda, ensuring the pharaoh's reputation endured for eternity, whether in truth or idealized art. These depictions presented the ruler as both king and general, mastering the battlefield as a sacred duty. Victory stele recorded battles in glorified detail. Egyptian rulers commemorated their military triumphs with monumental stelae, tall stone slabs inscribed with detailed accounts of battles. These records often exaggerated victories, presenting the pharaoh as an unstoppable force favored by the gods. The Battle of Kadesh, for example, is recorded in multiple temples with nearly identical inscriptions portraying Ramesses II as a hero who turned the tide single-handedly. Such delay served both as propaganda and as religious offerings, crediting divine aid for success in war. They were placed in temples and public spaces to inspire loyalty, intimidate enemies, and immortalize the pharaoh's achievements. Even when the historical accuracy is questionable, These inscriptions offer invaluable insights into how Egyptians viewed warfare, kingship, and the gods' role in human affairs. Ancient Egypt's influence lasted over 3,000 years, from its unification around 3100 BCE to the conquest by Rome in 30 BCE. Ancient Egypt remained a distinct and influential civilization for more than 3 millennia. Over this span, its art, architecture, religion, and political systems evolved, but retained a recognizable core identity. Egypt's stability allowed for continuous cultural development, unmatched by most other ancient societies. Its monuments inspired later civilizations from Greece to the Islamic world, and its religious ideas influenced neighboring cultures. The sheer longevity of Egypt's civilization is a testament to its ability to adapt while preserving tradition, making it one of the most enduring cultures in human history. Even after conquest, Egyptian culture shaped the invaders. Egypt was conquered multiple times by Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Yet each new ruler adopted key elements of Egyptian culture. Foreign kings were depicted in pharaonic dress, built temples to Egyptian gods, and participated in local religious ceremonies. The Ptolemaic dynasty of Greek origin blended Hellenistic and Egyptian traditions, producing rulers like Cleopatra VII, who embraced native customs. Roman emperors continued to fund temple building long after Egypt became a province. This cultural resilience ensured that even when politically dominated, Egypt remained spiritually and artistically distinct, influencing its conquerors as much as they influenced it. The monuments of ancient Egypt still stand as echoes of eternity. From the towering pyramids of Giza to the sprawling temples of Karnak and Luxor, Egypt's monuments have endured for thousands of years. Built to honor gods and kings, they were designed with eternity in mind. Massive stone blocks fitted so precisely that they still stand despite earthquakes, floods, and the passage of time. Hieroglyphs carved into their walls continue to speak across millennia, telling stories of creation, conquest, and devotion. These structures are more than relics. They are living connections to a civilization whose vision of immortality still resonates. Today, to stand before them is to feel the weight of ages and to understand why Egypt's legacy remains one of the most powerful in human history. And so our journey through the wonders of ancient Egypt drifts to a gentle close. We have walked among temples where columns rose like forests of stone, traced the slow curves of hieroglyphs, carved thousands of years ago, and stood beside the silent faces of statues who have gazed across star centuries without blinking. We have heard the whisper of desert winds against pyramid walls and felt the echo of footsteps in tombs. Why kings still lie wrapped in the dreams of eternity. Egypt's story is not simply one of gold and monuments, but of people. Scribes bending over papyrus by lamplight, artisans shaping the eyes of gods from crystal boatmen steering cargo up the slow green bar vein of the Nile. It is the story of a civilization that reached for the eternal, and in so many ways touched it. Now, as the sands settle and the last light fades behind the desert hills, let your thoughts drift, as if on the Nile at dusk, the world quiet, and the stars beginning to bloom overhead. The voices of the past grow softer, the monuments dissolve into shadow, and time itself seems to slow. If your eyes are growing heavy, you may rest here carrying with you the knowledge that Egypt endures in stone, in memory, and in the still places of the mind where history becomes dream. And when you wake, the wonders of the ancient world will still be waiting for you. If you wish, you can join me again in the next video where another story of science, history, or the cosmos will unfold slowly, quietly, like a candle being lit in the dark. Sleep well, traveler.
you.